What's up, everybody? It's Tyler with Hook Sets Are Free. Hope you guys are having a great night. It is 10 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here in Colorado on October 29th, Friday night. So, whenever it is that you're watching this video, whether it ends up being live or on the replay, hope you guys are having a good one. I am streaming for the very first time here on StreamYard. I have never actually tried streaming through StreamYard. So if you look, you can see right up here a little deal that says powered by StreamYard. So I am going to attempt to show you guys a little bit of footage that I have recorded of the Inu rig underwater. But again, this is all kind of for the first time ever. So there's a possibility that it might not go all that well and that I will have to end up deleting this stream after it goes up. So if you guys are in here, start dropping comments so that I can see you guys in here. Hope you guys are doing well. Let me see if what's up, Ron? What's up, Daniel? Okay, so I can see your guys' comments over here, um, which is awesome. This is the first time I've used StreamYard, like I said, and just wanted to give it a shot. You know, a couple things that are really beneficial about using a streaming service like StreamYard, for example, is that I can share my screen with you guys. So if I wanted to pull something up on, say, Tackle Warehouse or Discount Tackle, or like I might do tonight and show you a video that I've got saved on my computer, then that way you will be able to see it here as opposed to me streaming directly through YouTube. So of course, the other main benefits are that I could bring one of you guys in or another outside person to join the stream. So, what's up, Abe? He says, "How do you like that monster?" Oh, I loved it, dude. You've been catching some hogs. Abe sent me a couple photos. Has been bass fishing, and unlike Ron, Bassless Chap over here, Abe has caught some largemouth bass as of late. None of them too big, but a bass is a bass, right? And so, congratulations, Abe, for getting out on the water and experimenting and getting the hang of catching some bass, locating them, and trying out a few different techniques. If you wouldn't mind, drop a comment and let us know how you've been catching and targeting these fish so far. Are you fishing from the bank, from your kayak? Are you fishing from a boat? And what kind of lures are you throwing and having success with so far, especially at this time of year where the water temps are really falling pretty quickly and it can be totally unpredictable. Corey, what's up, man? Finally caught one from the start. My man. Okay, so Abe has caught two so far. Both little guys, but that's all right. I went fishing a few times this past week, and I will say it has been tough out here. Uh, I would want to say that from last Sunday through yesterday, the wind was howling, and it has been extremely difficult to get on fish when the weather is the way it has been, and the wind is blowing at least 15 miles an hour, but more like 20, uh, and sometimes more than that. So when the weather is like that, it is very difficult, um, not only to cast into the wind and properly place your cast, but to work your bait the way that you want to and find fish. It's just not quite the same deal. Now, having a little bit of wind ripple on the water is always a good thing. You know, if I can find something that's 5, max 10 miles an hour wind, then that's good. I don't mind fishing in dead slick conditions, but I do mind fishing in ripping wind conditions. So I had that 2 times earlier this week and just could not tolerate it very much. So I I did catch a few fish. I want to say I only caught like 5 or 6 fish this past week. But if we didn't talk about it last weekend, I did go in search of some smallmouth and could not locate them on a number of different presentations, from a chatterbait to a jerkbait to a lipless crankbait, um, to a drop shot. And yeah, there was a heavy weeds where I was fishing. So I ended up moving around a bit, and ultimately located some fish off of the dock at this lake. And I was throwing a light Texas rig with like a 1/8 ounce tungsten bullet weight, pegged about a centimeter from the hook. So not totally pegged, but certainly not unpegged. Just trying to give it a little bit of freedom of movement. I was using a 2/0 hook, EWG, and throwing that new Maxcent D worm that I've been showing you guys. The D worm is a very skinny 5.5 inch shaky head style worm. And I mean, I know I picked up another pack of them recently when I showed you guys the Maxcent baits that I just picked up. And here they are. So this is what she looks like. Very skinny worm. And on that Texas rig, I started noticing some hits. I could feel some fish picking it up and even moving it a little bit. But every time I set the hook, I'd miss these fish. And then I started feeling pecks. So really kind of told me that these were small fish and or panfish. So I switched over, re-rigged it as a drop shot instead of a Texas rig, and just to be able to present the bait some 6 to 12 inches off the bottom. So not a long leader on the drop shot, and I nose hooked, or actually I threaded on a drop shot hook onto a piece of that D worm. So just about a 2 inch section of that D worm, and almost immediately started catching yellow perch. So got into a handful of yellow perch that way about a week ago. And then since then, I've only caught a couple of fish. Caught one on the 13 fishing jabberjaw in the bluegill color. Really like that bait. I've talked about it a handful of times, including on the stream that I did with Debo a couple of weeks back, mentioning that I was going to be throwing that lure more frequently as we get into the fall. So I have been throwing it and did catch a decent fish on it like 5 days ago. And then a couple days ago, 3 days ago, when the wind was absolutely brutal, kind of last ditch effort, went into a pocket and made the same cast like 6 times in a row with the KVD 2.5 wake bait, which is like a one knocker style wake bait. I'm sure you guys have seen it from me before. I actually really like this bait. I've got a couple in a bunch of different colors, but this was the one that I was throwing. This one's new, but the one that I've been using this summer is still tied on upstairs, and I've swapped out the treble hooks on it. So I did just post about this bait on Instagram a couple hours ago, and I swapped out the hooks, the front one for a red Mustad triple grip, sized up to a size 2. Actually, these might be size 2 stock on this bait, but swapped it out for a red EWG in the front and then a feathered treble hook on the back. So as you can see, this bait has a wake bait lip on it. So it has a tendency to want to stay on the surface when reeled at a slow to medium speed, but you can bring this thing subsurface some 6 to 12 inches, depending on how fast you reel it or what combination of line that you're using. So, quite honestly, the other day I threw this on 15-pound fluorocarbon, was trying to swim it subsurface, uh, as deep as I could, knowing that this would still run more shallow than a shallow diving square bill, even when fishing it fast on fluorocarbon. So, cool thing about this wake bait, aside from its rattle, which you can hear is obnoxiously loud, little one knocker in there, but this thing runs really true. So you can fish this thing super fast, and it will not blow out. So I've got it in some cool colors. This one is my favorite. It's called Oyster, which is essentially just like a bone with a little bit of blue on it. This is a cool color called Shizzle, the Shizzle. Okay, it's more greenish with like a hue of pink on it. You see that little line that is pink? And then you guys know how much I like this color, Natural Shad from Strike King, as well as Gizzard Shad or Green Gizzard Shad. I don't know what they call that. And then I've got it in a couple other colors, like a classic Sexy Shad and a Bluegill. But yeah, that KVD 2.5 wake is kind of a must-have bait. I will say that. So it's also tough to beat the price. The only other one, say, in its category that is cheap and yet very effective is the Berkley Wake Bull. So this doesn't need to be a wake bait show by any means, but have been throwing crankbaits a little bit more as of late, and been catching them. The chatterbait I have never put down. I've been having tremendous success on it all year long, which is pretty typical for me, but the bite has turned off in the last few weeks for me. So the chatterbait really is not doing it for me, which I'm not quite sure why, but it is what it is. Let me catch up on these comments. I apologize. All right. Abe says, on the kayak, on the Colorado one, kayak on the Colorado River, one on the 6 cents catwalk, and the bigger one on the Drop Dead Ned. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. I didn't know you threw that, but that's a good one. Oh, stop it, Ron. You're going to catch a bunch of bass this upcoming year, man. 2022 is your year. I believe it. Guys, I don't know why my battery is not plugged in, but I need to do that real quick. My laptop, because I am going to run out of battery in the next half an hour if I don't. So give me 5 seconds. All right. Now we should be good. Imagine if Ron made it another 65 years. That would be epic. Justin, what's up, man? Not too much. Thought I would hop in here and hang out for a little bit tonight. Maybe even show you guys a little bit of underwater footage that I recorded last night of the Inu rig. I didn't have my settings properly set up on my GoPro, so the cropping of the footage is not like I'd want it to be. You do see the hole in my sink. I've got a pretty deep, like 18 or 24 inch sink that's probably 24, 36 inches wide. It's a big sink in our kitchen, and so occasionally I will film some underwater footage or tinker around with baits in there. And I did with the Inu rig last night with a couple different baits. And so I thought I would talk to you about it and just share a few of my initial observations and questions that I still have about the rig. So haven't gotten on the water and used it, especially with the wind conditions that we had this week. I decided not to fiddle around with really anything finesse. Was kind of really only power fishing, trying to throw crankbaits, chatterbaits, spinner baits. I even threw an A rig and friggin' broke it off within an hour of using it. So that was super disappointing. You know, just kind of threw 25 bucks down the drain. Um, Even trying to use a relatively affordable A rig. You know, I was using the Yum Flash Mob Junior, which is like a $15 A rig, and then I'm using uh, Gamakatsu round ball jig heads in like a 1/8 ounce and some Kitex. But yeah, that wasn't too fun. I was using it too shallow, and then I moved to the other side of the lake to fish deeper. And literally on my first cast, I was using braid to a leader instead of just heavy fluorocarbon, um, which was a mistake. And on my first cast into deeper water, where I was feeling confident that I'd be able to get on some fish, just chunk that thing, little backlash, and boom, the wind got the best of me. So it's a damn shame. Corey says, caught a few fishing from a boat on a shaky head with whatever Z-Man style trick worms are called. They call them the finesse worms. The bait that is actually like a trick worm. Same shape. It's called the finesse worms. What up, Matt? How are you doing tonight, man? Says, was able to score my first HPH swim bait and Pat's swim bait. Can't wait to get next week. Sweet, dude. Okay, Abe says, got to finally use the Smackdown on my SLX MGL 70, and no shit, it casts farther than any other, but got a lot of practice with all the bait casters. Good deal, man. Happy to hear that. Yeah, Abe, it is a pretty giant sink. It's almost like a laundry room type of sink in our kitchen. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, you guys will see because I had my GoPro set in super view, which I ordinarily would have as the setting if I've got my GoPro on my chest, just so you can see a wider angle. But ordinarily I would switch, you know, there's super view, wide angle, and then linear. And ordinarily in the sink, I'm going to linear and I'm moving the angle so that you can't see the whole of my sink. Uh, I just think it's kind of a ugly look, but you guys will see tonight. Biggest fish I caught this week was a 3-pounder on a jerk bait, and the rest were small guys on a Rapala Slim 6 and the Depths Evoke. Right on, Matt. I mean, at least you're catching fish, right? Um, you know, like I said, for me, it was super windy. I only had the opportunity to get out like 3 times in the last 7 days and did not fish very long any of those times because the weather was so brutal and the wind was howling. So, all right. Um, do you guys just want to see this footage if I can pull it up or what? We can kind of get that out of the way and talk about the Eno rig a little bit more. Sorry, Ron. I know that you're probably still a little bit fed up with it, but um, let me tell you kind of what I decided to use and throw. I rigged up 3 different worms, and one of them did not even work well for me. So I didn't even bring it down here right now. But the 2 that I did use um, were the one that we rigged up last week together, and that is the good old Zoom Magnum trick worm So here she is. And after watching the original Inu rig video by Hiro-Sans TV on YouTube, there were a couple things that I realized that I had done wrong when rigging this up with you guys. So if you remember, I literally just rigged it like this, right? Which in theory looks just fine. Now, don't mind the drop shot weight because I don't think I did that quite right, but you're going to notice in the footage that it does make a difference in terms of action. So I have this thing rigged where I've got the straws going through the bait from top to bottom. And quite honestly, it does not want to bend very easily on itself like that, like this. Whereas if you bend it side to side, like wacky rig style, it definitely wants to bend a lot easier. So theoretically, I should have rigged it like this so that the straws were going through perpendicular to how they are right now, going straight through the side of the bait. I think that would have had a better action to it, but that's just a slight observation, okay? But because this one was already rigged up, I decided to just give it a shot. The other thing that I did not do or notice when I first rigged this up with you guys, because I was just guessing, I had heard about the rig and seen kind of generally how it works, is the angle at which the straws need to go into the bait. So as you're rigging this thing up, as Hiro-Sans mentions, the straw actually needs to go in at an angle at about 30 to 45 degrees. And every time, you see I've got this rigged straight up and down through the worm. So that did not benefit me in terms of how the line passes through these straws. It will make for a smoother action if you have the straw pointing in the direction of the other one. So both of these first two straws should be pointing down toward each other, if that makes sense. And then actually, Hiro-Sans does not use a straw in this last hole where he's got the split ring coming off the bottom. So he threads it through and then pulls it back out. He doesn't actually glue the straw in there. And I don't know if that adds a little bit more friction or what, but I did notice that in the video. So, something to consider. Ron, you've got a lot of suspicions with the Inu rig, and I'm not quite sure about that. I've noticed people throwing a second hook on the bottom as opposed to a split ring instead. And so I'm sure that would help with the hookup ratio, but you can't say anything about the hookup ratio until you give it a shot yourself. And I'm sure that if you could find a thinner diameter coffee stirrer or tubing, that using a shorter worm that is a little bit less beefy and maybe even one that is heavier in nature would benefit this rigging. The trick worm is at kind of a high float type of soft plastic. There's not a lot of salt in this guy. And so I noticed right away that when throwing it weightless, that was a problem. When I threw a nail weight in the head of the bait, it helped tremendously. Then essentially what you get is a Neko Inu rig, or what you can do is throw a drop shot weight off the hook. So I literally did not think about it in the moment. I was just trying to get footage of the rig. And so I just tied on to this hook a short leader and a drop shot weight. So I did not use a swivel or anything like that. You end up getting these lines tangled a little bit. It's not the ideal way to do it, but adding some weight to the worm to keep this thing on bottom and have that extra resistance made a tremendous difference. Okay. So those are a couple notes. And then the other worm that I used that did work really well was the Z-Man Bang Sticks. So this is their Nico rig worm. And same deal. Right when I threw it in the water, this thing floated to the top. Obviously, the trick worm doesn't do that. It has a very slow fall. But Z-Man Soft Plastics do straight up float. So that was a problem. So I went and got this Z-Man Nico weights, which if you guys are not already familiar with these are awesome. This is a mushroom style weight with a dual barb plastic barb keeper. So it is made to work really well with the Laztec. And literally you just shove it in there and it sticks in very well. So once I put in this Nico weights, the thing stood up just like you would expect a Ned rig or a Z-Man bait on a Nico rig to do. And so then this was more of a Nico rig with a little bit of extra action than just a what you would suspect that the Inu rig is. So I will show you both of those baits underwater. The other one that I tried using was the 10-inch Berkley Power Worm. And I will say the plastic was too stiff. I did notice that observation from the trick worm in that it bends easier side to side than top to bottom. And so I rigged that one properly. But yeah, I could not get great action out of that guy, at least on footage. So I thought it would be cool to try a curly tail worm because Hiro Sans uses a curly tail worm with his Inu rig on his original video, and it looks freaking good. So I wanted to figure that out, but could not. Okay. Well, you guys are popping off in the comments, eh? Frankie, no, they're not being sold pre-rig just yet. Matt says I'd rather just Nico over this, even though it's a cool idea. I would too, honestly, because what you'll see in the video is that you can really see all the holes in the bait, and I don't think it drastically improves the action of the bait. Now, on that trick worm, it kind of does. So Frankie's also not wrong that it looks like a weed catcher. One thing that I noticed is that the hook was facing down. So I do have to play around with the orientation of the hook itself to figure out how to get that thing to be on top of the bait instead of on the bottom, which was pretty annoying to me. Matt says Wawa's coffee stirrers probably work amazingly because they're pretty small and they're red. Interesting. Yeah, we don't have Wawa here in Colorado, but I know what you're talking about, man. I used to live on the East Coast for a while, so. Hard pass, hard pass. Okay. People are going to catch insane bags on these for sure, says Justin. I'm just a lazy Sally. 8-inch Yamamoto Senko, no. Again, too much plastic, dude. That thing's not limber enough. Hiro Sans, the original guy, uses a Zoom Magnum Swamp Crawler, which, quite honestly, is ideal. The 16-inch Gambler Worm could be hilarious and maybe pretty effective. That would be interesting. So now that I'm caught up on comments, let me see if I can share this. Okay. I don't quite know how to do this. So hang in there with me for 1 second. Share screen. Video file? Maybe. All right. Z-Man Inu Niku. Inu Nico. You guys see that? You guys can see that. Let me see if I can swap these. I'm just going to remove myself for a minute. No, can't do that. I apologize, guys. Here we go. That'll do. Justin, I don't know if I agree with that. So long as you just pre-rig these things on a Yamamoto worm, it wouldn't be too bad. You know, the baits are not durable as it is, so you're gonna have to re-rig no matter what type of rig you're using. So I actually like the way that this rig looks like this. And this only runs for, golly, I've got like 2 minutes worth of this right now. So I apologize. You're not going to see a whole lot that's different. Let me try and fast forward. I think I start working this bait just a little bit softer like a Nico rig. So you can just see, essentially, I can work this thing like a traditional Nico rig if I just hop it slowly, or if I work it fast like I am here now. Then you get that wiggle in the middle of the worm. So this ends up being kind of a multi-purpose rig where you can slow work it and it will look and act just like a traditional Nico rig, or you can pull this thing a little bit harder or pop it and the whole thing will wiggle. You know, that tail will go down more because you're getting a little bit of pull from the middle of the worm. No, you can't really get that action from a Texas rig worm, Ron. What you're going to get is just kind of a looping action or a drag. So let me show you in slow motion what this bad boy looks like. And I thought I had pulled. Yeah, okay. Sounds like someone knocking on my front door, he says. Yeah, I guess I can mute it for you. Here you go. Can you still hear me talking, though? So, Ron, look at the way that this thing twitches. So, see how it's almost... So when I mute that, does it mute me too? I mean, honestly, I'm trying to mute it so that you guys aren't so You don't have to hear all that sound. But that's one, okay? Now, the other one, could you hear me when I muted that, or did I just disappear sound wise? Because I don't want to blow your guys's. All right, it is fine. So then I'm going to show you guys the Zoom Inu on a drop shot. Ron, you can hear me right now? I didn't think you could. But if you can, that's all good. What's up, Riley? How you doing? All right. So then I will mute it and talk. Here's the slow-mo of this same presentation. So you can see, Ron, what? I thought it was longer than that. You can see as I pull it that it actually comes all together. One more time. You're not going to get an action like that out of a Texas rigged worm, all right? Straight up. I only got one or two more to show you, and these are throwing the Zoom trick worm on a Nico. Okay? So I put a nail weight in the nose of the bait. Looks like I'm not letting it touch the bottom very often there. And what you'll start to be able to notice as this thing rests is that the hook is oriented down. Look at that. That is Snag City right there. So I got a problem with that. I don't love it. Look at that. It's like upside down. And I tried rigging it through on the other way. So now, Ron, why do you say still a hard pass? I For me, the jury's out. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm mixed about it because it's kind of cool how it brings together a wacky rig, a shaky head, a Nico rig, all at the same time. So I think there's something a little bit appealing about it, but I'm not totally sure. Okay. Now, if you work this thing a little bit faster, then you start to get that pronounced action as you pull it through the water. And I've found that that's kind of the case with all of these. As I said, this sink is only, 24 or 30 inches wide. So I'm only moving it some 2 to 3 feet at a time. So there's not a lot of room for me to pull this thing where you probably would on an ordinary cast. Really get the most action out of this bait. So what you're seeing are literally just small pulls of maybe 6 inches at a time. And I think that's pretty much it that I wanted to show you. Yeah, we'll call that good. All right. Daniel says, could you rig a hook through it weedless, not using a wacky hook? You probably could. Yes, just through the midsection of the bait. You could rig this thing on an EWG, or you could throw it on a weedless Nico hook or something like that that has a weed guard. But of course, either of those things are going to mess with the hookup ratio that's already questionable, or at least Ron says it is. So who knows? Riley says, confession, I've never used that setup before, and it's cool to be able to see what happens underwater. Well, confession, nobody here has used that before because it's pretty much a new concept that just came from Japan this past week. So, yeah, it's a very wild rig where you actually thread like a coffee stir through a bait multiple times, and then you thread your line in and out, in and out. So yeah, it's absolutely crazy, Riley. What it does when you look at this thing rigged up. So you got the hook up here. The line comes down through this first hole. Oh, I've got tension. So you run your line down through here, up through here, down through here. It's a line disaster, and you can see all that underwater. Okay, so look at all this line. That's essentially what we're working with, and it's kind of insane. It is difficult to re-rig because what you have to do is cut off the line at the split ring, and you have to then slide your hook up the line. Essentially, your hook becomes a line through. This thing just goes up the line, and then you just have to re-thread your line through your new bait. Up, down, up, tie on a split ring or another hook, and you're good to go. But yeah, essentially creating a night crawler style action out of a soft plastic worm. So new-ish rig or concept coming out of Japan that has gone viral on YouTube more than anything in the last 2 weeks. So it's got a lot of people talking, ourselves included. Ron says, still does not look like it did when you held it and pulled the line. No, I agree. But I would say that you were more wrong in thinking that there would not be any tension on and it would just be a limp noodle in the water. So Matt says it has pretty good action, just not for me. I think it'll work just as good as a Nico. But I don't think it's worth the headache of rigging them beforehand. Sure. Frankie, they honestly take about 3 minutes at most to rig one worm. So if you were just plowing through rigging a whole pack of soft plastics, you could get it all done in less than 30 minutes, and then you've got a bag of them. So that if let's say you're the type of person that fell in love with this rig, um, it wouldn't be that much of a hassle. What you'll notice in this is that I've got this one at an angle, okay? Coming down this way. And then this one this way. And then the last one this way. So with this one, the line does pass through the holes a little bit easier. And that's cool. So Frankie, that's because the Japanese are a little bit smarter than we are. No, not really, but the Japanese are more of perfectionists, and they have to be more forward thinking when it comes to fishing. All right, so here in the US, we've got a lot of bodies of water to fish, and our fish can get pressured, but it's nowhere near what the Japanese are dealing with. So not only do they care way more than we do about details when it comes to techniques and um, all of the components that you're using and the tiny little details of what goes into an individual bait and why you ought to use one more than the other and what type of hook and line. Everything is way more refined in Japan. But on top of that, they only have a very limited number of bodies of water to fish from, and it's super pressured. So fish catch on to techniques a lot quicker, and guys are constantly evolving the way that they're fishing in order to be able to get bites. And that's not really a problem we have here in the US, but there's a lot of people who respect the mindset that comes from Japan, the innovation, and just the willingness to try new things in order to get the job done. So, to each his own, right? Riley, you can find the baits anywhere. I was just using the Z-Man Bang Sticks and the Zoom Magnum Trick Worm. But what you have to do is get like a coffee stirrer or something of the sort and thread it through the bait and glue it in there. So if you just search on YouTube, Hirosan Inurig. Inurig is Inurig, and Hirosan is Hirosan. He's a Japanese guy who posted the video like a month ago. It's already got 2 million views or something. And it's not like he has a huge following on YouTube. So, yeah, he's the one who really gets credit for creating the rig and stirring up all of the excitement. Alberto, what's up, dude? Think it's a great rig. In the last month, I've seen the Ina rig rigged in several different ways, double hooked, weighted, 2 straws, etc. I think there's still a lot to discover. I totally agree. It's a new concept. There will always be a million different ways to twist that concept and improve it. So I have also seen some of those variations and will probably continue toying around with it just to keep the mind fresh and to perhaps give it a shot sometime between now and next pre-spawn. You know, when it's finessy, or when I'm not fishing, when it's frozen. What up, XX Night Stalkers? Playing catch up. How did you place the inserts in the Z-Man Bang Sticks? Same way that I placed them with the other baits. So, per Ron Hawley's recommendation and a few other people, if you cut a coffee stir at an angle, it will make it sharper. Okay, you'll have kind of a pointed edge, and then you just want to find where you're going through the bait. Push hard, it will stretch and eventually pierce. And then you pull it through. And then I find that if you stretch the bait, it'll allow for some of that plastic to kind of come back around the straw. And then, just like normal, throw some super glue on there, push that part through, and cut off the edges. So, same exact way that you thread it through, it just takes a little bit more effort. But yeah, the Bang Sticks is a good one. One that did not work well for me that I thought would was the Z-Man Mag Fatties. I didn't even mention that I tried it on that bait, but I thought that in general, the longer the worm, the better action you're going to get. But what you find with the Mag Fatties is that it is truly Magnum, and you don't get a lot of pulsing action because this thing is relatively stiff. So I find that it's better to fish this thing on a shaky head on a Nico rig, on a drop shot, wobble head, however you would ordinarily fish this thing, but not on the Inu rig because it's fat toward the head and it tapers down a little too much to this narrow tail. So yeah, not the best option, just like that 10-inch power worm from Berkley that I mentioned. I think you do really need a limber worm, which is why the Magnum Swamp Crawler is Hiro-san's worm of choice, and why I told Matt that I would not use the Yamamoto 8-inch Senko, 7-inch Senko, any Senko for that matter. This is the closest thing to it, and you get a lot more. This thing is way more limber than a Senko is, you know. So the Bang Sticks gets my approval. Matt says, I've seen them put tracers on cranks and soft swim baits with nail polish type paint that goes on and allows them to see it better. Interesting. Who are you saying that to? I did not notice that, but Daniel says, I think the 6.5 trick worm flexes a lot better in the videos that I've seen. Yeah, it very well might than the Magnum trick worm that I showed you. I just thought for whatever reason that a thicker worm would get less damaged by something like a coffee stirrer. And in retrospect, I don't think that's the case. Matt says you need to check out this little new Raid swim bait. It's releasing. It's almost like a Huddleston design, but man, it falls so nicely, looks natural and snack sized. All right. Yeah. Shoot me a reminder on Instagram and I'll go check it out sometime, okay? I forgot that I could show your guys' comments. Never thought it would go through a Lastec. Yeah. The only thing to really consider, man, is that a Lastec floats. So you really do need a Nico style weight, like this Z-Man Nico weights that I talked about, in order to get it down. Otherwise, this bait will just float on top of the surface, and I don't think give you quite the action that you want. Having a little bit of weight allows for more resistance in the water and that bait to have really the action that you're looking for. So, yeah, I think throwing it on a drop shot is really ideal. But Carolina rig, dude, that's not a bad idea. Nice. Alberto says the thing with that soft plastic is just do the first 2 loops and let the tail wiggle by itself. Uh, you mean without a third hole? That thing, then it just bends like this, and you've got the tail section. It doesn't wiggle. Dennis says, watch the podcast of Steven Roger on the Uni rig. I've accidentally called it the Uni rig as well, but it's the Inu rig. Yeah, I hear you. I haven't seen that podcast, but maybe I will check it out. Thanks. If you guys want to switch the topic off of the Inu rig, let's do that. I've been on for 54 minutes. We just been chatting a bit, and then I showed you guys that footage. But I'd love to talk about something else, anything else. Why don't you guys ask a question if you've got one? I'm pretty sure I saw Matt earlier tonight drop my name in Alex Rudd's live stream in referencing this bait right here. I was only on that live stream for a few minutes, so I did not jump on and leave any comments. But as it was on in the background, as I was doing the dishes from dinner, I happened to look right at the moment that Matthew left that comment and tagged my name in there. So yeah, the shower blows frog is pretty sick. What else do you guys want to talk about? I've got 800 baits on my desk right here. Um, and there's a million different things that we could talk about. But here we're in the last, oh, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks of fishing for me here in Colorado. And I kind of knew this might happen, but fall really crept up on me and almost passed me by too quickly. I thought that I would have more opportunities to really get into some days where I would whack on the fish when the water temps were just right. But unfortunately, water temps uh, jumped from say mid 60s to mid 50s very quickly and then have already dropped from there. So, in a period of a couple weeks, really most of fall just passed us by. And yeah, it's unfortunate. But part of the deal here in Colorado, we haven't had any legitimate snowstorms yet. And we're not quite close to freezing over, but I would not be surprised if that happens before Thanksgiving. Ron says he wants to talk about the Morning Dawn colored Agent E, and I do not. Do they make that color of that stupid bait? Matt says I've been trying to use my swim baits as much as I can before it gets too cold, or mainly my wake baits. Then I'll switch to glides when it's mid 50s, and it's this damn rain. Yeah, mid 50s. We're already way past that. It's about 50 degrees, or by now, perhaps even in the low 40s. So, yeah, it happened way too fast in like that second week of October when I was still catching them. The temperatures just started dropping quickly. So, yeah, I thought I would have a longer stretch of really good fishing that would have been happening last week, this week, next week, and unfortunately, that did not happen. But weather is a thing in the fall, you know. So, guys, there's 9 people in here. Put on your thinking caps. Do you have any questions? Do you have any anything in particular that you want to talk about before we get out of here? If you don't, no big deal. I just did not come in with much of an agenda this evening, and I apologize for that. I just am a little bit scatterbrained at the moment. I was with my kids all day today. My wife worked last night and is working tonight, so I didn't have much time to actually think about what I might stream about tonight. But last night I was kind of playing around with that Inu rig in the sink. So yeah, Matt says the water's 60 degrees right now in Jersey. Well, yeah, get ready for it, man. I'd say the next couple weeks for you should be damn good. Although that might not be the case, but should be able to get on them pretty well. When the water is kind of mid 50s, I find that fishing's real good. At this point, I'm going to really need to start throwing a jerk bait and working it slow. See what kind of damage I can do. You know, one of my favorite bodies of water from this year is actually closing the day after tomorrow. It's really only open from, generally speaking, open water season, which is usually kind of end of March, early April until the end of October or early November. But yeah, I mean, we can talk about jerk baits. Ron says must or bust on the Inu rig. You know, I still haven't wrapped my head around how to answer a lot of these must or bust questions because in general, so far I would say it's a bust. but I haven't even given it a shot. So, must keep trying, maybe is my answer to that. All right. So, jerk baits. We talked about jerk baits maybe a month ago or so. But what I will say is that a couple things to keep in mind are water temperature. Okay. So, for Matthew, who's chilling at 60 degrees right now, he could go more aggressive. And probably should if he's throwing a jerk bait. You know, he could still get away with throwing a Rapala X-Rap, which is one of my favorite jerk baits just straight up. I've got a million of them. You know, you could throw the Lucky Craft pointers still, and a fair amount, right? Those are going to be good baits to keep working and work hard and work fast. So those are baits that have a much more aggressive type of action, and can be hit hard. But as you start getting into colder water, you're going to want to slowly transition to baits that have a more subtle action. So maybe at first what you do is you switch over and you throw something like the Lucky Craft Pointer 78, which is a lot quieter than its big brother in the 100, right? So not only do you see the size difference here and profile difference of the 100 versus the 78, the 100 is a lot fatter, but listen to this. Very loud rattle in it. The 78, quiet, all right? So you get a smaller bait and a quieter bait, but you still get that aggressive action and a bait that wants to be hit pretty hard. So that's one route to go when the water starts getting colder. Couple other routes that I would go when the water is, say, medium temperature. Aside from downsizing, we'll just talk about kind of regular sized baits. One way to go is like the I'm a Flit, which I talk about from time to time. This is a cool bait because it has a slender profile and has all of these different rattle chambers in it. Can you see that? This thing has like 3 different rattle chambers and a bunch of little BBs in there that makes it sound more like a lipless crankbait than a jerkbait. But as you get into mid temperatures, say mid 50s, one place that I'm going to go is to a flat-sided jerkbait. Okay, so obviously lipless crankbaits, flat-sided crankbaits are going to work well, but that also applies to jerkbaits themselves. So 2 options. This one is the dual hardcore minnow, hardcore minnow flat, and this is the 110 size. You guys know that I also really like the 95 size in this bait because it comes with 3 hooks on it, which is pretty rare for a bait this size. Kind of falls into that same category as the Megabass Vision 110 Junior. But the hardcore minnow flat and the Jackal re-range are 2 that that I will start using right in that time where the water is cooling down. is not quite as warm. This is more of a shallow diving jerk bait, say 2 to 4, 3 to 5. And then this guy is going to run about the same or maybe a foot deeper. But either way, what you get out of a flat-sided jerk bait is a lot more roll and flash. So as you work this thing, it's going to flash a ton more. So when the fish this time of year are really balled up and being chased by schools of bass, something like a flat-sided jerkbait that gives off more flash is going to perform better, generally speaking. And then as you get colder, you want a bait that's going to be quite a bit more sensitive. So I will occasionally use something like the Spro Mix Stick or the 6 Sense Provoke. Both are good mid-range jerk baits that have a very consistent action, kind of right in the middle of the road. They're meant to compete with high dollar jerk baits, and yet they cost kind of that mid price range. So those are great options for jerk baits that you want to suspend and that you might want to work a little bit slower. However, once you start getting into jerk baits that you're really going to work slow, I'm going to sound like a broken record, as I mean, I have been before, right? But the Megabass Vision 110 is really, really tough to beat. So I was going to pull out a couple different color patterns, but the standard Vision 110 has that louder rattle. It's the weight transfer system. This thing's going to suspend a little bit nose down, but it is going to suspend perfectly in that colder water. So as the water gets cold, you want to work this thing, pop it on slack. Okay, you do not want to pull this bait at all. You only want to pop the slack and just give it very crisp. You're not going to hit this thing nearly as hard as you are with the pointer. This is more subtle hits of the slack just to get that thing to jump from side to side. But it's going to have a very consistent darting action that is unrivaled because it's more refined. Now it is a really expensive bait, but in cold water where you're going to let a bait like this suspend for 10, 15 seconds or longer, the Vision 110 is kind of the way to go. And then if the 110 is working, but the bite starts slowing down, then I'd go to something like the 110 Silent. It has literally no sound to it. Okay. It doesn't cast quite as well because it doesn't have that weight transfer system in it. But again, I like the 110 Junior. And have started throwing it just a bit more than the original because in a lot of the bodies of water that I fish, the bait tends to be just a little bit smaller, and I find that I can get more bites. And I still tend to prefer more bites than big bites, just because I have limited time. You know, I'm only out fishing for a couple of hours at a time, sometimes less. And so the more fish I can catch, the better, quite frankly. Daniel says, I got some to try. how do you feel about the 6 cents Crush 50 and the Flat 75X? Okay, two totally different baits. The Crush 50X is a rattling square bill. I think that Crush 50S is silent and the X has rattles, if I'm not mistaken. But the Crush 50 is essentially just a 1.5 square bill. It's going to have a very consistent medium wobble to it, good deflection, solid square bill. What you're paying for with the 6 cents Crush square bills are really the finishes as opposed to the action. In my mind, in most instances, a square bill is a square bill. So that's just me. But the Flat 75 is a cool bait. Really good bait. In fact, my flat side box is just over there. I've got a handful of those Flat 75s, and I like them. Only real issue that I've had with them is the hooks. That this can happen with a lot of 6 cents baits is that they are super well made, and I love the fact that they come with quality hardware on them straight out of the package, but they put those EWG, and they might even be triple grips from Mustad. I'm not totally sure, but they've got big short shank EWG treble hooks on all of their hard baits. And to me, that's not always ideal. So with something like a crankbait, I prefer a round bend that is a little bit lighter wire than, say, a heavier gauge short shank EWG. So I would swap those hooks and downsize just a little bit to like a size 4 or 5, depending on what brand you use, round bend hook. You know, Gamakatsu makes a size 5. Otherwise, Owner makes a 4 and a 6. You can throw a 4 just fine. So, yeah, the Flat 75 is a cool bait. It deflects well. It's got a nice, consistent action to it with a decent amount of wobble for a flat-sided bait, and it's pretty loud too. So I like it. Ron says, "How do you feel about jerk baits in shallow ponds?" Sorry, I haven't been showing all these comments. Again, I'm a noob to StreamYard. So when it comes to jerk baits in shallow ponds, I like to throw shallow runners. All right. We've talked about that before. So something like the Rapala Ripstop is a good option to throw in ponds. Or better yet, just throw a floating jerkbait, Ronald. My box of finesse jerkbaits is not with me right now, but I would throw a floating jerkbait in a pond. It's a great option, and you can throw. There's a wide variety of brands that make floating jerkbaits. So, you know, of course, you could go old school and throw a Smithwick or something of the sort. But Rapala, the original floating minnow, is a balsa bait. Awesome in ponds. One, because it is balsa and it's silent, but you can work that thing slowly. And yeah, I like it a lot. Now, other than that, there are lots of lure manufacturers that make floating jerk baits as opposed to suspending, or they will make the same bait in a suspending version and in a floating version. So if you want to throw jerk baits in ponds, just get a floating jerk bait, and that way you can either work the bait a little bit faster, you know, twitching it as you work that thing on more of a steady retrieve, or you can just slow reel that thing up toward the top and it's going to swim. So you tend to fish jerk baits differently high in the water column than you would a suspending jerkbait, unless it is a shallow runner like the ripstop, which will suspend, but only a few feet below the surface. So Matt says, pointers just work, man. Have a bunch from Ollie's. Yeah, pointers are great. Talk flat sides if you use any for cold water. I think a lot of people don't throw them as much in the winter, but crush in the mid 50s. Yep. And the Rapala Shadow Wrap is a shallow jerk bait that floats. Is that right? Sometimes I get those guys mixed up. I've got the Shadow Wrap Shad, I believe, not the Shadow Wrap. They all look kind of similar. I want to say I've got the Shadow Wrap Shad. No. So I think you're talking about the Shadow Wrap Shad because as you can see right here, the Shadow Wrap is a slow sinking bait, okay? The Shadow Wrap Shad, though, is a slow floating bait. It's not a high float. It is not a floating jerk bait. It will get down to depth and then slow float. So, a little bit different than a true floating jerk bait, but I know that Yo-Zuri makes some good floating jerk baits for sure. I tend to use like the Yo-Zuri Pins Minnow when fishing in ponds. The Rebel makes one that's not their countdown minnow, but another floating one. Ron, if you hit me up separately, I will. I'll tell you all of the small bodied floating jerk baits that I use in ponds, or the ones that I will fish like crankbaits and fish on a straight retrieve with an occasional twitch when I'm fishing in ponds. So that's almost a separate conversation altogether. Daniel says our water, I think, is just starting to drop below 60. With the rain the past few days, I would guess it's in the mid 50s. Yeah. Cool. Well, you better be ready, man. So, Matt, I don't know where my flat side box is right now, and I don't want to fiddle around too much right now in trying to find it, but that is a good topic of conversation for us to cover, say, on one of my next live streams. I do think that you guys should be throwing them. That's for damn sure. And I was planning on having some of the Strike King chick magnets in by now. I had ordered them, and there was a problem with my order. It never got processed. So I think that will be an interesting bait in that it's made from plastic and it has a pretty loud rattle in it. But I think that Rapala OG Slim 6 is just a dynamite bait. Great value for $10. You can find them a little bit cheaper sometimes, depending on where you buy them, discount tackle or otherwise. But very good bait, especially for diving in that 4 to 6 foot range. I do really look forward to that Tiny Slim 3 coming out this winter. Otherwise, the Evergreen Flat Force 4 is a go-to for me. And wow, sorry about that, barking spider. That was not pleasant. But I swear I'm fine. As bad as that sounded, I'm okay. That Root Beer Slim 6 is really nice. Had to get it in the shad color. Got 4 fish on it. Sweet, dude. I kind of wish I had my flat side box with me, but again, we will cover that very soon. And let me just look. Let me look real quick. All right, so I don't have a ton of flat-sided crankbaits. But like I said, the OG Slim, wicked, okay? And they make it in some really good color patterns. Citrus Shad, that's a really cool one. This is just like their classic river shad. I forget what they even call it, but Helsinki maybe. And then they make it in some craw patterns that I'm not going to pull out right now. The other that is kind of a must-have for most people is the Berkley Frittside, okay? And they make this in a few different sizes. A 5, 7, and a 9, I believe. And the 5 is one that I have not explored as much yet, but have every intention to do. The 7 is probably more of my go-to than the 9. And that is just running depth. The 9 is a deeper running bait, but look at how narrow this bait is. These baits are compared pretty frequently. The Frittside is a plastic bait, but is silent. A very faint rattle. Okay. And the OG Slim is a balsa bait, obviously silent as well. But couple differences are the profile. It's kind of hard to tell here, but this OG Slim has a thicker section up by the head, whereas the Frittside is a bit more narrow all the way throughout. And it's got a coffin style bill that is made from plastic, whereas the OG Slim has a coffin board round lip to it. So deflection really does come into play there in terms of where you're going to fish those baits more frequently. You might fish the OG Slim around rock more than you would the Frittside. And the Frittside, you might throw more around wood than you would the OG Slim. The Flat Force, the other one that I throw a lot more frequently than this one, I've got upstairs in my bag right now. This has just a slightly smaller body and also has that similar type of lip as what you get with the OG Slim. Another bait that I do throw fairly often, but is a deeper diving flat-sided crankbait, is the Strike King 1.5 flat, KVD 1.5 flat. This is a good bait. It's affordable, and it runs true, just like all the KVD stuff. So it would be more along the same lines as like the Frittside 9, okay? And then like we talked about, the 6 cents flat 75X. These hooks are too big, in my opinion. And same goes with the Rapala OG Slim. This has a hybrid style hook on it that is halfway between an EWG and a round bend. But again, I think it's a little too big and needs to be downsized. Both baits will hang up a little bit more than is ideal or is necessary. So something to keep in mind for those. Daniel says the OG Slim is $8.69 discount tackle right now. Yeah, that's a pretty good deal. Appreciate you checking out Discount Tackle. For future reference on these streams, I'll leave like a little leave a little deal with my affiliate link, perhaps. Um, although I don't know if you could probably click a link from this guy, so I don't know how much that makes sense. But I'll go ahead and leave that for you guys right now if you want to go do some shopping later. Can you even click the link from the chat right now? Matt says same at Bass Pro, I think. Where 8 solid reason. Got a couple on the racks, was filled. No one touched them. Like what people are doing. I didn't say that right, but you found a couple on the racks. All right, cool, man. Now, I did find this little box here. Ronald. This is a 3600 size box that is kind of my small pond, small bass, panfish, and trout box of jerk baits, small crankbaits, small poppers, etc. So, yeah, I would say a couple that are must-haves. Are the old Rapala floating minnow. This is a smaller size, like the 5 maybe. They make these in a tiny little size 3, which I do believe I have. So here's the same color. This is a color called Hot Steel, and I really do like it. So you can see the size 3 is minuscule. The size 5 is small. And then as you get into the 7, the 9, and the 11, you start getting much bigger. So 3, I believe, is 30 millimeters long. This thing only weighs like 1/16 of an ounce or something crazy. This size 5 is more like 50 millimeters. This is like a 3-inch bait. And this guy weighs like an eighth of an ounce. So they are very hard to cast, these balsa floating jerk baits, but they're floating. They've got a really good action to them. It can be reeled slow or a little bit more quickly and twitched, and they're silent. So really quite like those. And then the Rapala, this is the same body that they use on the Countdown minnows, but they do label on the bill of these guys, which will be hard for me to show you. It says floater. I don't know if you just saw that. Floater. These guys have a rattle to them. And then, like I said, the Yo-Zuri Pins Minnow. These things weigh about the same as those Rapalas. So really light. They make these in some tiny sizes. And I do carry those as well. So like here's the little 1/16 ounce, tiny little guy. And then these are more like the 1/8 ounce, more like a 3.5-inch bait. And they do have a little bit of a rattle in them. and they're labeled on top of the bait. So let me see if you'll actually be able to see this. Try and pull out one that is more translucent for it to show it better on the camera for you to see. Yo-Zuri F. See that? So F for floating, all right? Only thing to notice about the Yo-Zuris is that the hooks that come on these are absolute trash. They're like saltwater coated, just ugly. Don't like them at all. But yeah, one other bait that is underrated, but worth having for fishing in shallow ponds is the Rapala Ultralight Minnow. Okay, this is one of the original baits with that L-shaped bill on there. You see that? And that is made for it to run shallow. So yeah, this is an ultralight bait. So for a plastic bait compared to the balsa, it is going to weigh just a little bit more, but these guys are really lightweight. Has a slight rattle in it, Ron. And I just lost one of them, but it's all good. If you are fast reeling, you can go to a countdown style bait. And I've told you guys about 36 times over the years that my favorite countdown style or straight retrieve style ultralight jerkbait that is actually made for trout is the Dynamic Lures HD Trout. A little bit harder to find. You'd probably have to buy this from Cabela's or Bass Pro or off of Dynamic Lures website, or hit me up and I can get them very easily because they're based here in Colorado. I've got this bait in like every color you could imagine. You know, more of like a clown. I've got it gold, silver, white, pink, perch patterns, rainbow trout, brown trout, everything, and I love it. Rebel makes an ultralight, well, I don't know if it's ultralight, but a countdown minnow that's pretty good. All right. Corey says Rebel and Cotton Cordell make some of the smaller ones too. Yeah, no, Rebel. I just talked about those. Yeah. Rebel was one of the first ones that I mentioned, that rattling one that is a floater. I like that better than the countdown minnow personally, but countdown is good for fishing in current. And Ron, if you didn't catch all that information or you have further questions, feel free to ask, because I didn't necessarily show you everything. You know, I have mentioned as of late that a few that are a little bit higher dollar, but will still get used by me in certain situations. If the water is just a little bit deeper, I will go to the suspending baits. This one here is that dual hardcore minnow flat, and this is in a size 70, I believe. So it falls right into the same category as the Lucky Craft Pointer 65. Little guy. And then even smaller than that is that Megabass Great Hunting jerkbait. This is like a size 52 millimeters, something real small. But that's a sinking jerkbait. One that I got recently but have not tried yet No, that's a sinker. Yo-Zuri. And there's an S right there instead of an F. So I'm not even going to recommend that. Only other one that I maybe would recommend for fishing in ponds, if you are going to fish the bait a little bit slower, is the new Strike King KVD 100 jerk bait. Okay, this bait dives not nearly as deep as the 200 or 300, which are relatively deep diving for being traditional jerk baits. That J200 and J300 that are not the deep divers still go somewhere in that 7 or 8 foot ballpark. A little bit deeper than a traditional jerkbait that would be in that 4 to 6 foot range. And then their deeper diver goes down in 12 or more. So this 100 size, on the other hand, dives right in that like 2 to 5. So if you upsize your line or you throw this on monofilament, you can make this thing rise even more. And on top of that, this thing is not a true suspender, but rather a floater straight out of the package. So you do have to tinker with it, as I have done with 1 or 2 of the ones that I have, and thrown some suspend dots and things like that on them. I want to see if I've got them to show you. I think throwing 2 suspend dots did it for me, at least when I was testing these out. But yeah, straight out of the pack, those things float. So would be worth a look too. And Matt says, Duo makes some great small baits, small jerk baits. The Rosante 63 is great. I've heard that from a number of people, and I will keep that in mind. Moving forward. Guys, it's late here my time. I got to dip out of here. We've been on for an hour and 37 minutes. I super appreciate you guys and you guys being patient with me while streaming on StreamYard for the very first time. So thank you for hanging out. It's been a fun Friday night chilling with you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your night and a good weekend. I will probably not be on tomorrow night, just given that my wife is not working. And we will have the night to ourselves before then, a busy Halloween Sunday. So that just kind of comes with the territory of having 2 young kids that are super excited to trick or treat and a baby as well. So we're going to be pretty busy on Sunday. Plus, I'll be watching the Broncos. Ron says, did you ever check out Colorado Custom Lures? No, I did not. But I maybe need to. So thank you guys. Abe, Ron, Corey, Matt, Daniel, dudes, thanks for chilling tonight. Hope you have a great rest of your night. And yeah, glad to hear it, Daniel. Thank you so much. You guys have a good one, and I'll talk to you again soon.